Reform are talking about having business leaders run government. I was like, that is a terrible idea.
Jason Stockwood has spent most of his career one step ahead. His CV reads like a who's who of recent UK tech success. Lastminute.com, Match, Skyscanner. He built companies in some of the most competitive corners of the internet.
The business got better when I left. We bought 12 companies and then sold it 3 times quite quickly and had an exit in 2017 for 500 million.
So after all that, what do you do next? You buy a football club, of course, and become involved with one of the biggest giant killings in history. You got involved with Grimsby.
Grimsby Town with the Titanic toppling of the top tier.
This is a little bit embarrassing to admit.
The Prime Minister then picked up the phone and asked him to become the Minister of State for Investment. He sits at the centre of one of the biggest questions. How do we get growth in the United Kingdom?
Capitalism is our best way of raising living standards. This is there's a North Sea oil moment for us again.
What have you sort of got planned for 2026?
You know you're going to get sacked at some point in this job. If I make it to 2 years, that'll be the longest hold of this role.
Make sure you subscribe so we can continue to get bigger and bigger guests.
So, Jason, welcome to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future.
Thanks a lot.
I feel like this has been one of the longest recordings in the pipeline for ages. I think we first chatted about it 3 or 4 years ago in the early days. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile earlier and I was delighted to see you've got the House of Lords, Investment Minister, etc. But before all of that, entrepreneur is still there. So I feel like you tick more boxes than anyone we've had because you're also heavily involved with Grimsby Football Club, which we'll come on to as well. First, I think you've got one of the most fascinating jobs in government in terms of the investment minister. But what is the job?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. And I know you've had some patience going backwards, but I think I've got something to say now, hopefully, as well, after all these years. And it's funny, I was at an event last night and someone introduced me as a former entrepreneur. I'm still like, my career isn't over as a result of taking this on. I hope not. Anyway, I hope it's not over. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's probably one of the best jobs in government. So, it really is probably the least political, I would say, is that it really, and it's been great because I've spoken to some of the previous incumbents, particularly, before Poppy, so Joe Grimston and Lord Johnson as well. It's really about how do we capitalise some of the major projects in the UK. So one of the things that isn't as clearly articulated, I think, is that we've got a modern industrial strategy, we've got a plan for turning around the economy and growing the economy. And really my job and the team's job is to get out there and make sure we've got capital to do that. Sort of secondary responsibility is sort of being the voice of government, the voice of business within government as well. I was a little bit nervous coming in as my first sort of government role of what I would find, because the role sits between the Treasury, Department of Business and Number 10.
Yeah.
And so I was a bit nervous about what I'd find in the Treasury from the sort of things you read in the paper. But, it was important to me to be part of a government that was pro-business, pro-growth, pro-wealth creation. So sort of 3 months in, that's definitely true. And so the sort of secondary role when I was coming in was really being that voice of entrepreneurship and business within government as well. And I guess the third bit is really about, if there are people that want to invest in the UK, the Office of Investment just works as a sort of concierge and tries to make life easy for them. So, how we help them navigate our systems, our legislation, visas sometimes as well. So we're trying to make the UK the most attractive place to invest.
And how do you what are the kind of like KPIs that you're measured against?
Well, it's funny because when I came in, you'll know this from your time in government, it's really weird. You sort of get the call and then you look for the induction and the welcome, and you just turn up and you're doing the job straight away. So I had a few weeks to think about it. So I wrote myself a 90-day plan, as you would as a CEO, and I'm just coming to the end of that now, pre-Christmas. And it really was to decide that. So it was to set the clarity of purpose and direction for the team, set the ownership structures and priorities, both for the organisation and for myself, work on the team itself, and then work on the deliverables. And so we're in that process now of working out, but without giving you the details of the numbers, the sort of things are, how we affect sort of the GDP, how we look at the number of deals come through, how we look at the number of jobs created, how we look at, I'm particularly interested in where we influence deals, so making sure that we're just not passive recipients of people coming to invest in the UK. Because, I never took government money in any of my businesses, so I turned up to places because I wanted to do business and wanted to work in those places. So I'm keen to make sure that we're value added as well. So we've got a team of people, and prior to Christmas, we'll have those numbers. But broadly, what we're trying to do is help the economic growth story.
Yeah. And how, it's funny because I think back to my time in number 10, and the two things whenever we were doing trade trips or anything like that was, what is the investment figure that they're putting forward, and what are the number of jobs that are kind of created? And it was funny because before going into number 10, I was a bit skeptical sometimes of these kind of like big announcements and so on. But actually, a trade trip or an investment summit or something like that really does actually focus the mind and get it all kind of pulled together. What have you sort of got planned for 2026 in terms of that?
Yeah, that took a bit of adjusting to. I know it's only sort of 4 months, but everything is accelerating. But there is that whole thing around events galvanise people, as you say, to actually put. So there's almost an infinite amount of complexity and deals and things that you could be working on in government, which is we should talk about why it's. I mean, Reform are talking about having business leaders run government. That is a terrible idea, and I can come back to why I think that's a terrible idea. You need business people in government, but all business people running government would be awful because there's something beyond deals. But I mean, the US deal, I think I was in for a couple of weeks, and there was $150 billion of investment both ways, and it's really important that it just focuses the team on saying, what can we deliver that we can announce. But importantly, the OFI is the delivery mechanism for a lot of those deals as well. I think what I was slightly skeptical was it's just a big headline number and then kind of so what, you move on to the next one, but there's a whole delivery mechanism that's behind that. And then importantly for me, one of the things, and this is a personal metric rather than an OFI metric, is like how does it impact particularly our regional growth? Because I think part of the reason I've come into politics is this sense that these big headline numbers are quite meaningless. If you're from Grimsby and you hear 150 billion in data centres and sort of life sciences, but like people are like, my electricity bill's still too high, my mortgage is too high. So trying to work out how does that translate to the electorate more broadly, and how does it impact people's lives? But so for next year, so in the first 3 months we've been in India with the Prime Minister, in Saudi with the Chancellor. I was in China last week. So more of the same. I'm trying to have a sequence of travel every month. So we're both, we've got this prospectus of projects and, the industrial strategy growth areas that we want to focus on. So making sure that we're pitching those to global investors. And that's a sequence. And every month I'm trying to get, although civil service tell me you can't plan for longer than 3 months, but I'm trying to get a schedule of travel for the whole year so I can get out and do the job selling the UK. And then, just being really structured around the delivery of the industrial strategy. We've got these 8 sectors, well-defined, focused on our key capabilities and making sure that there's plenty of capital to get those things going.
What surprised you about the job in the first 3-4 months?
Do you know, one of the things, it's quite prosaic, but I've talked a lot about, and comes up to that point around being in business, is that I used to find that time was fungible, and I could find time for everything that I wanted to do by working a bit late, a bit longer, or getting some extra resource on stuff. And you can't do that in government. Nearly everyone you meet has got a different view of what they want to see from government. So you combine that by, 60 plus million people in the UK, and then all the international people we're seeing. So the discipline of prioritising is 10x what I did as a CEO.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me. And I have to be really disciplined around where you spend your time. I'm to say no to a lot. I'm being disciplined around what the priorities is, because you're just getting... So I've got 5 people who manage my time now, which is just ridiculous. I don't see my emails anymore in the same way I used to. I've got this pathology around I used to try and clear my emails every day as a CEO. It's just not possible anymore. So I think just being really disciplined around what are the things that you can move and influence. Yeah. And you have that as a CEO, but I think it's 10x'd in this job because the demands on your time. And then there's a sense of pace that I'm trying to put through this in myself. And we talk about football, right? I feel like it's the first time I can speak to our football managers at Grimsby and feel like, you're going to get sacked at some point in this job. And that's inevitable about being in politics. So I'm trying to, I said to my wife and kids, I was like, look, I'm going to be fully on 7 days a week for however long I've got this, because I want to make sure when I look back on it, I've left everything on the pitch and I've done as much as I can to influence positive growth in the UK. And I had that as a CEO, but I'd sort of dialed that back and got a bit more balance in my life since I stopped being a CEO. and I've just turned that back on. I'm quite enjoying it, but it is clearer priorities, infinite options that you don't have, and then there's just a bit about how decisions are made as well. I mean, this is well documented in the public and that, but these are the complexity of decision making when you're not just looking about growth, but you're talking about national security, you're looking at international relations, trade deals, or diplomatic relations. There's a bunch of complexity that is both fascinating and frustrating in equal measure. And this is why business leaders shouldn't just be running government, because, I take a lot of advice, obviously, on security, on foreign relations, on diplomacy, and you just don't have that experience as a business leader. And that's just a level of difference that you can remember. It's just, and business looks a lot easier.
Yes.
Now I'm doing this just by the simple. You have products, you have services, you have your team, your organisation. It's all pretty well structured.
Yeah.
And the nuance and complexity required in this is just it's fascinating, but it's an adjustment.
It's quite like direct levers, like in being an entrepreneur, like products and so on. And it's funny you say that about time, because I always say to the team here, the best thing about being an entrepreneur is that you are actually in control a lot more than when you're in government. If you want more sales, send more sales email. Like, it's quite sort of related, but when you're in government, it's completely different.
I like that, just to build on that, because I used to feel like in Simply Business, my last business, if there was I always really empowered the team and really enjoyed being part of a group. But if there's a specific issue you have to apply yourself to, you just used to force yourself into an issue, and you could, by personal will and capability, really change the direction of that. And that only goes so far in government, because there's our second and third order consequences you're not thinking about as well. So your ability to direct stuff immediately is still there, but I've spent the first 3 months and 4 months making sure I'm building relationships. And particularly because we're across different departments of government, I think that's even more important.
That makes it even more complex as well. Are we? So what do you make of the kind of like perception of Britain at the moment, both from outside across the world, but also from Britain itself? Because it strikes me we might be in danger of talking ourselves down a bit.
Yeah, I think it's a really brilliant observation, and notwithstanding being full of cold and a little lack of an energy today, part of the role is trying to make sure we change that perspective. I mean, you can't be a pessimistic entrepreneur, right? You can't do it, right? So there's something about, we all know that sentiment and your own personal energy and optimism makes the difference on projects, right? And I'm seeing that quite a lot, the perception and the reality. Like, I'm more... this might sound like a weird statement, but I'm actually more optimistic having been in government for 3 months, because I can see there's this mismatch between... The analogy that I've been using is that we're in a turnaround, rather than sort of 14 years of decline and debt and whatever. I'm saying, no, look, we won the election. First year is doing that remedial work in a turnaround, acknowledging where we are. But we own it now. Let's kick on, and we've got a plan. And we have got a plan: the industrial strategy, the infrastructure strategy, our relationships internationally. We've got a plan to execute on this, which has actually been validated by economists when you look at the rate of inflation coming down, our relative positions on savings, on consumer confidence, on debt. It actually is, it's going to work, right? And I feel that confident about it. And yet, if you turn on the telly or you look on social media, the world's going to hell in a handcart. And I was in Saudi of weeks ago, and they're talking about like I was in London at the moment, all the stabbings. And I'm like, I'm just like this idea that we live in this super unsafe city, and I'm just like, so there's something weird. Some of that is probably bad actors, making sure that's a story that a narrative they want to peddle. But part of it is ourselves, right? We've got to get out there and we've got to puff our chests out a little bit and tell the positive story, particularly relative to the places in the world. And so I want to be doing that. Part of wanting to come and speak to you is that to tell that story, right? Like, entrepreneurs will recognise this, is that you talk yourself into a reality somewhat as well. Yeah. And I think as I get into this role now, I feel really confident about the medium to long term prognosis. But it's not as political as other parts of government. So when I see people talking about leadership chances, I'm like, look, we've got really serious, high quality people running this government. And like in football managers, the illusion that changing a manager changes the trajectory is wrong, both from a data point of view and a reality point of view. And we've just got to get on telling that positive narrative, and hopefully people giving us the benefit of the doubt, because ultimately, your trajectory on something is curvilinear, it goes up and down, but as long as the trajectory is up, and the trend is up. That's what we want. I think we're on that trajectory, and we'll have good days and bad days, but the overall trend is up. And yet the media sort of cycle and the impatience that we have is that as soon as we go slightly down, people want change. I think that's a really, really bad idea.
Yeah.
And another thing I've seen in government as well is like we need to do a better job at storytelling, telling that story. I think that's well understood, and I want to be part of that. But sentiment and confidence as an entrepreneur is such a massive part of success, as well as luck and timing. Hard work gets you so far. But telling that the positive story and focus on that is important.
So, what is the story that you're telling when you're going out on these trips abroad and so on?
Well, I mean, it's fairly straightforward actually. We talk about like stability in sort of the geopolitical. We talk about the geopolitical situation that we're in. The UK, from the Magna Carta, 11th century onwards, like we've got this rule of law and this system of operating that we shouldn't underestimate, and the sense that we have deep cultural and law-abiding ways of doing business and commerce and our relative position in the world that is valuable. And people see that and they value that. And we don't think about that often enough. You then have that we have, for the wheres and wherefores of Brexit, like we are where we are, we have this ability to redefine our trading relationships in the world. And again, we're doing that quietly, and the Prime Minister's not getting enough credit for this, but the deal we did with America, when you think of perhaps some of our ideological differences, is amazing, right? And got that done, first one in the world, preferential terms, and that wasn't obvious, prior to that. So, same thing with India, same thing that we're doing in the Middle East with the GCC now. We're stepping back into our relationships with China. We're getting close to Europe, 4 to 6% of GDP, depending on what you read there. We're our closest trading partner. And so we're redefining our positions, and we're able to do that. And then there's some really obvious stuff like our deep R&D base, our universities, for the top 10 universities, our deep access to capital structures, and so this our professional services, you go on and on and on. And we just need to keep telling that story that when you go around the world, we've still got a really positive image globally. And I think we just need to remind ourselves of that sometimes. Our relative position relative to other countries is really strong.
Yeah.
I think it was Deloitte put something out that we are the most attractive, investable country in the world still. And we sort of forget that sometimes, I think.
Definitely. What did you spoke to previous holders at the office.
Yeah.
What was their kind of advice? What were the top tips that they gave?
Actually, they all enjoyed the job with varying degrees of like time spent. I think the record was only 2 years. I think.
Yeah.
Jerry Grimston. But they've all been great, and just been really clear about what you want to try and deliver yourself. Because if you allow your diary to manage you, you can endlessly be meeting interesting people with their own particular things they want to talk to you about. So really defining what you want to achieve. So I've spent the last 3 months thinking quite clearly about that, and I'll pulling out some of that stuff early in the year. But there are specific projects where I want to personally influence that.
Yeah.
And I have a massive bias towards regional development. Naturally, from where I'm from, I think that's going to be important. So I want to spend some time on that, but actually just defining, what are the things that you uniquely can press ahead with. They all said that, and hopefully just try and see if you can last longer than a couple of years. That'd be ideal as well, wouldn't it? Yeah. Which is a fairly low bar, doesn't it? But which is again something different about politics, right? You don't go into any job thinking if I make it to 2 years, I'll be the longest holder of this role, But that's definitely what I'm trying to do is have some longevity in this, so I can deliver as much as I can.
Let's talk a little bit about your kind of like early career, because it's kind of amazing kind of reading through some of the places that you've worked at. Like it feels like reading the kind of history of British tech almost in terms of like lastminute.com, Match, Skyscanner, like some fascinating roles. How did you end up at lastminute.com?
So I always say that, like, and I've sort of appreciated as I've got older that, hard work is a necessary condition for any success, but it's not sufficient as well. So I had a massive amount of luck that I've always been in. So I started off as a waiter on the docks, in call centres, travelled a lot, drifted around quite a bit, and then studied philosophy as a mature student, just because I was into it and I was interested. And I came to London. I was going to go back and do a PhD in York in political science, and I came to London basically to go clubbing in the 90s. And I worked at Trail Fans, a travel place, and I ended up staying for 5 years. Probably enjoyed that a bit more than I should have. But then the internet was starting to come about into public consciousness, and I just started to read. I was like, this isn't interesting. I had no idea the scope or scale of what it would be, but I started to read up on it. And I saw this job I was working in travel and basically saw this advertisement for this new internet company. I was like, oh, it just sounds cool. And because I've been reading up on it, I remember I met the head of HR, and I'd been reading up on it. She went, oh, you know a lot about it, but I just was into it. And so I got the job running the airlines bit and the commercial bit. And I didn't know the number, but I think Brent put something out that was like employee 30 or something. So I just was like into it and was lucky. And then a massive amount of good luck there, because it was a real meritocracy. I mean, I just felt it was the first place I'd ever walked into and just felt, this is cool. I feel like it was, businesses that we take for granted now, that it was just one floor. And if you had, I remember you having your courage, your convictions. You go to Brent and Martha, the CEOs, and if you had your courage, your convictions, you were prepared to put yourself out there, they would just give you responsibility. So it was, and then we just got really lucky that, it floated before the bubble burst and stuff. So, profit wasn't a high motivation in the business at the time. And so it was just a real stroke of luck, being in the right place at the right time. And then it became like dog years. Is that if you've been in the internet by 2002 and you have 3 or 4 years experience, you were experiencing the internet. And so stuff started coming up, and I left in 2005, I think. I'd got promoted to run a couple of companies that we'd bought eventually. And again, just being in the right place at the right time, we bought 12 companies, I think. And so the idea that they would give someone 33 or 34 2 companies to run was just unheard of with my background.
Yeah.
And they just would, like, because they knew I was a grafter, they just gave me this opportunity. And then the Match stuff came. Match came about because I was internet dating. I met my wife on the Guardian website. I remember telling my mates about it and them laughing so hard about the fact that I was on, like internet's for losers and, you're weirdo. And I was thinking, I don't think I'm that, but, if we're buying travel and books, this might be a big thing.
Yeah.
And so, I had the opportunity to take Match throughout Europe and stuff. And so, again, it was just being slightly ahead. But it was, a lot. I've always been a grafter, and I think that's the Grimsby thing. But at the same time, I think just being born in the 90s when the internet was coming into public consciousness was just like, that's nothing to do with me, but I grabbed it. I definitely grabbed the opportunity.
Okay, so this isn't your usual ad read. We've just partnered with Hunch, an AI job finding platform that I believe in so much, I've actually invested in it. If you've ever listened to Jimmy's Jobs and thought, I'd love to work with those guests, now you can. Whether it's the UK government, Google, Amazon, or the BBC. Hunch makes it easy to discover and apply for roles at companies like those. And here's the kicker. We'll be hiring through Hunch soon too. So if you download it, you might even end up working with us. Honestly, for our listeners, this feels like the perfect fit. Just visit askhunch.com to learn more. Back to the episode.
What did sort of working on the docks and the waiting side of things, what did that kind of like teach you for the rest of your career?
Well, I always like people. So I like, the Grimsby thing is like, it's very open community. People talk, people like chat. I like that. So I always enjoyed working behind bars and waiting on, but like a bit of humility as well. I remember one time I played a football game for the county, and the team was coming back to the place I was a waiter. So I actually played the game and had to go back and serve the players that I'd played against. I remember that being really tough for me. So lessons in like, I needed to make money because we were skint, and humility and just not being bothered by that stuff. So just a bit of a thick skin on, what you have to do to get by and stuff. And the docks was the same thing. I was skint. I'd come back from, I got a scholarship to school in America, and then I came back and I went on a kibbutz in Israel just because I wanted to travel a bit more. And I was skint, and I came back and I worked on the docks because it was the only job I could get.
Yeah.
And so just the necessity of having to earn money, but I also realised like I wasn't cut out for manual labour. I was just like
what was the job on the docks then?
I was a general labourer, so I'd like whether the jobs went day to day, so I used to do some painting, or I'd do like lugging stuff off ships or cleaning conveyor belts and stuff. It was always the job. The company we worked for did the jobs that the company's employees didn't want to do themselves. Yeah. So it was always the rough stuff. And I was just like, I do not want to do this. It's really hard. And there's some good people. Some of us see now and about in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, but I was like, I need to get my act together. Like I can't see myself doing this for 50 years. And that's no disrespect for people that can, but I was like, I am not cut out for this. So it was just a good level for me, and also it's a reminder now, like, sitting in Ballon doing a podcast isn't hard, compared to what people really graft and do. It gives me real perspective and real respect for knowing what hard work looks like.
Yeah.
And this isn't it.
Yeah,
right?
this
So,
is not it. No,
and that's
I
no
know.
disrespect to you. I know there's like, but it's not like getting up at like R5 in the morning, being picked up to be on the docks for 6 o'clock, and working with your hands all day. Like that is a shift. That is proper hard work, and I've got a real respect for that.
What did your parents do?
Well, my mum, I'm a single parent family, so I'm one of 4 boys, all got different dads. I don't know who my dad is, so I've never met him. Don't even know who he is. My mum passed a couple of years ago, so I'm not going to find out. But my mum was a grafter, loads of different jobs. So she was a debt collector, she was a cleaner. She did anything she needed to do just to keep us sort of fed and watered, basically. So wasn't ideal, but I reconciled myself as I got older. She did the best she could for us, and a lot of respect for when we'd got our relationship into a good position by the time she passed. And I was just like, yeah, look, I've got 3 brothers and we're really close. I love them all. Well, we've got different dads, but like when I look at the start I had in life and the fact that I'm connected to my brothers, I've got a real solid, my wife and my kids for the last 20 years. I'm part of a community that I love and I feel connected to, even though I don't live in Grimsby anymore. And so, yeah, my mum did a good job. The hand she was dealt in life, she played it really, really well. Her dad killed himself when she was 12. He committed suicide, and they never spoke about that stuff. So she had a lot of trauma in her child. I only found this out later on. So I had, unpicking that as you think about having your own kids and family and the sort of parent you want to be. My mum did an amazing job in tough circumstances, and you just have to make sure that you get that to a decent spot. And I wrote an article in The Guardian, actually. I had that column in The Guardian that's on my Twitter, and I'm really proud of that. When she died, I just felt sadder that I didn't feel sadder about it. Like I was upset about it, but the fact that I wasn't as close to her as I see in other relations, like my wife's family, the love and connection and traditional family they've got is really powerful and really profound. And I had to get to that with my mum, because my mum was out working, and we sort of brought ourselves up with my nana, and it was rough, but it was what it was. And actually, I'll tell you something interesting. So my son, when he was 8, he's 14 now. When he was 8, he said something to me, and to this day, he's a really smart kid, as is my daughter. But I was telling him so I was really honest with my kids about not knowing my dad and the sort of upbringing I had. And my mum was married 3 times, and one of them was a boozer and a bit physical. And so, but I also said I was going to be honest with my kids. I was telling my lad this, and he turned around to me and said to me, when he was 8, he said, "Oh, do you think your disadvantages growing up are your advantages now in your life and have made you?" And I was like, Christ, if he's 8 and he's saying stuff like that. Yeah. But there is some truth in that. Like, as long as you get through all those things and any trauma that you have, the resilience, and I'm not scared of stuff. Like, probably my wife thinks I've got a bit of my brain missing. The ability to turn up and be a government minister with no training is weird, right? But I was just excited about it.
Yeah.
But I don't have that sort of fear, because I know what life can be. As an alternative. So, and a lot of entrepreneurs have that, don't they? Either neurodivergent, or they have, tough childhoods or whatever. And I think it's, if you're able to work through that stuff, it's really powerful in terms of resilience and capability. But I went quite deep, didn't it, James? Sorry, I brought the mood down a little bit. I'm trying to do an uplifting speech about the economy, and I'm just like, it's about trauma and challenge.
I think as well, like, part of it is you know how bad things can be, and I think you'll find it quite good in politics in terms of the idea that you might be sacked or whatever. Like, I felt this was just that, the background that my dad had as a coal miner and whatever, I was just like, it's not going to be like that. Like, and if you've had that growing up, it just gives you a lot more kind of respect and resilience, I think, really, for it.
Yeah, and it also, it sounds grandiose and that, but it's I'm doing this job for kids like me in the 70s and 80s. Like, we were never short of food, but we were cold a lot. I remember, so I used to go to school. I told my wife, I used to school with my pajamas under my clothes, because I was so cold in the house. We had ice inside, and this wasn't particularly unusual in the 70s and 80s, right, as well. But it sounds like you're some character from a Dickens novel, but you tell your kids now. But I remember being cold a lot, and so there's something about. I was really proud, being in the Treasury last week when we looked at the 2-child benefit cap and thinking, no, this kids like me, that makes a difference too.
Yeah.
Genuinely makes a difference. And we can get into all the politics of is it welfare? Is it promoting wealth? I'm like, actually, there are kids that it will make a difference to their lives, because I was one of those kids. And so there's something about for me, there's a really deep connection and thread back to who I was then. It's still me now. That I remind myself, and actually this is why I feel like I love being in Grimsby, like going to the football every week or hang out with my brothers as I'll be doing this weekend and my mates from school, is that I'm the same person to them that I was, no matter what you do in your life and where you go. I love that about being in the town. Look, I'm not being false modest. I know the stuff I've done, the career I've had.
Yeah.
But most people don't give a shit about that. They're just like, you're the guy that they've known for years, and whilst they're proud of me, they treat me as one of their own, and I love that, because, you know, it's a reminder of, for me, it's like, I do, when I came into politics, a friend of mine, Rob Griffiths, said to me, it's like, just remember, you know, ask yourself the question in all the meetings you're in, would this translate to your brothers? Would this translate to your mate Spencer, who's a scaffolder still? Would it translate to, you know, your nieces and nephews that are there? So when I think about that 150 billion data center, I'm like, they don't care about that. It's like, what's it do? Is that bringing their gas bills down?
Yeah.
You know, so it's a good reminder, but it's also, there's a deep love and connection to the people in the town still that's really meaningful for me, and it's enriching for me as well.
So let's go back to the career, because we did that sort of almost the first third of it, perhaps. But then you set up Simply Business, right? Like, what was the opportunity that you saw there, and like, how did that sort of come about?
So I didn't set it up. So what happened was, so Match got sold, so it was owned by IAC, and it was great. And it was a bit early for me, but I was trying to do a deal to buy a French listed company, and an amazing entrepreneur there actually did a reverse and went to my boss at the time and bought the bit of the company that I was running. So it was a weird situation that it was a lesson in deal making, but I ended up with a few quid. But it was unsatisfactory ending for me, because I was enjoying the job, enjoying the company. They asked me to stick around, but like it was challenging working for, you know, French entrepreneurs, shall we say? So let's leave that out there. So I ended up with this weird situation. I had a few quid, but like I was only 39 then. I was like, so I tried to take a year out. We just had our first kid, and like within 3 months, my wife was like, "Get back to work, will you? Just get out of the house. This is not going to work for us or anything." So I just started to look at market again, like just being a bit early on stuff, and this wasn't particularly. So I started to do this this sort of spreadsheet and calculus on. I had a boss years ago that gave me some advice, and it didn't make sense for me for about 10 years. She was retiring. And I said to her, "Oh, if you had your career again, what would you do?" It was in the travel industry. And she said, "Oh, I'd pick an industry with high margins." And I was like, "Fucking hell, that's the best advice you can give your younger self." But like 10 years later, and as I was doing this, I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense to me," because the ability to work in a market that's high margins gives you so much more flexibility and freedom.
Yeah.
So I created this spreadsheet around high margin industries, low customer satisfaction, tech innovation low. And just like everything led to the insurance industry. Like customers hate it. Like the margins are insane compared to other industries. There's a lot of people who we know that are ridiculously wealthy from doing very little in that industry.
Yeah,
And this is, I'm like a lot of friends in the industry now, by the way, and it's moved on a bit. But at the time I was like, this is where I need to be. And not because like I was passionate about insurance, but because I was like, I can see my skill set and the things I know being applied here. So an opportunity came up. Chris Slater, who became my partner in this, had founded it with a few hundred people. But it was doing lots of different things. It was trying to be an aggregator. It was trying to be an invoice lender. It was so. I always tell the story. I met Chris, and like I knew nothing about insurance, and I needed him to stick around. And he's from Salford. He pretends he's from Salford, like he's an odd man, but he's actually from Worsley, which is the posh part of Salford. But anyway, we met on Euston Station, and. Two things about this meeting were good. So I'd been with my wife for a while, but we weren't married. So I said to Chris, "I'm getting married next month. So if I start, I'm getting married." And he went, "Is it your second or third time?" I was like, "Yes." I was like, totally set his stall out. I was like, "That's my first time." But the second thing was, I said, "Look, I need you because I've got no insurance knowledge. So I need you." He's been in the industry for years. And he said to me, I'll give you 6 months kind of thing. And I said to him, "I only need 3. So we had this really sort of macho exchange. Anyway, he's become one of my best mates now, and I love him. And he's like, we had this great journey together. But so we went in, and we quite quickly corrected it. We changed all the technology. We sold the 3 areas of the business that were underperforming and focused on insurance. And the insight from Skyscanner was a really thin model of technology, really clever technology and data play, but basically didn't own the customer vertical. So I said, look, to really own the value, you've got to go top to bottom. And that protects against a market change, but also you can take a piece of the value every stage. So we became in commercial insurance, which hadn't been done before, we became an aggregator, but we also owned the product. So we became an insurer, claims, and then the clever thing that we did is we started doing machine learning and unique pricing for customers. And this was like, again, with a bit of luck, in 2012, fintech became this big investable thing. Like it was around, and so again, we had a business that was on a trajectory. We changed the cap table, brought some private equity in, and then just got a bit lucky on the growth, and then sold it 3 times quite quickly, and had an exit in 2017 for 500 million, which was both luck and judgment. But it just felt like, but it was a great ride. But it was, Chris set it up, and then I just basically, together we refined it into a real tech play and a tech business that really understood. But it was the stuff that was doing in other industries. It was just web standards, but in the insurance industry, it was unheard of. So it was like being the tallest midget, or whatever the right saying is. I just knew what we could do, and it was quite straightforward to me. And then we just built a great culture around it that was fun and progressive before, working from home and 4-day weeks were a thing. Yeah. And we just found that empowering people just allowed us to deliver with a product mentality. And it just, it was great fun. It was, I'm really proud of it. And what I'm really proud of, a journalist asked me a couple of years ago, he's like, what's the proudest moment in your career? And without thinking, I was like, simply business got better when I left. I speak to people there all the time that all the metrics have improved. It's a lot bigger, it's profitable, but hugely profitable. And I was really proud of the fact that it wasn't reliant on me and Chris. Yeah. That when we left, like the team that was there have done an even better job. And so the fact that it's built to last is something that I hadn't thought about, but I'm really proud that it continues. It's got like over 1 million customers now. And so, that was, it was a great journey.
Yeah. No, that's quite a good measure actually of like, can the show carry on without you? And then you got involved with Grimsby, right? Like, like how did that come about, etc.?
God, this is a long one actually. So I'll try and condense it because I don't bore you and people listening.
A quick thanks to Octopus Energy for supporting this episode. Now, a lot of people know about Octopus for their home energy products. I have recommended people switch to them for years. But what you might not know is that they are now rolling out more products across home and businesses, from solar panels, EV chargers, heat pumps. So if you're thinking of upgrading your home or business and you are a Jimmy's Jobs listener, you can ping Jimmy at octopus.energy and get the very latest deals and insights. And if you're already on the journey with Octopus, leave us a comment or a message. I'd love to hear how it's going with their wider products. All right, back to the episode.
So there's 2 answers to that. So one is like, I'm a fan. I've been going to that club since like 8 or 9 years old, my first game. And so there's just a sense that the club was struggling, it was on a downward trajectory, and kind of looking around for a universe of people that could do something. And this is in a big universe of people that want to buy Grimsby Town Football Club. So me and a guy, Andrew Pettit, who's now a really close friend, brilliant. We didn't know each other. We knew each other's families. This is a Grimsby thing. So my brother dated his sister like when we were kids, but like his family, it's really funny. So he runs a £5 billion private equity fund in properties from Grimsby, but his dad was the local butcher. So when we get interviewed, it's like, oh, there's Jason, who's a tech entrepreneur, and Andrew's the butcher's lad, basically. But he's like had a far better career than I've ever had. So on a simple answer was like, the club needed some help, and there wasn't many people that could do it. But the longer answer was like, I was I'd gone back to university thinking about politics and had this thesis around our democracy only works if we have civic institutions that bind us. So it's the work of Robert Putnam in The Upswing and Bowling Alone, which is, capitalism is our best way of raising living standards, but our social capital is connected through institutions that we have. And so why our politics has become slightly untethered is because our civic institutions have been eroded, whether it's the church, union, social groups, whatever. So the sort of more grandiose thing behind this sounds a bit pretentious. So I was like, well, what if we could use the football club as an apolitical catalyst for bringing the community back together around the values of excellence, aspiration, performance, inclusivity, all these things. And then aligned with that, we've built, or actually it's opening in February, we've built an on-site youth zone in the town, which I've chaired and helped raise the money with a bunch of brilliant trustees. And so that's about an institution for the past that combined people, the football club, an institution for the future, a youth zone. And then I co-founded a charity called Our Future with a brilliant social entrepreneur called Emily Bolton, who'd done this for 20 years, which is about how do you build get a community to write its own story about the initiatives
Yeah.
that it wants to do, but doing that with the data-led way so it can become part of government policy. So there was a strategy behind it as well. So the simple answer is like, I'm a football fan. I wanted my club to improve, but there was something strategic behind it as well. But I didn't want to sound like some sort of pretentious. Like it was genuinely about I'm passionate fan. I wanted the football club to do well, but it was more thoughtful than that, about the art of the possible, about what could we do in terms of bringing the community together as well, and so people can write their own story, and then we can bring resources to bear on that to help facilitate the things people want for themselves, rather than someone coming in and answering a problem. It was about how do you let the community tell its own story. If that makes sense.
And so, what are the sort of innovative things that you've tried to do? Because people will be a bit more familiar, like with the Wrexham story, perhaps, but like this is happening more and more.
Yeah, so we had a massive stroke of luck. So I was trying to use data and analysis in terms of our recruitment. That's quite well understood these days.
Yeah.
But we had a massive stroke of luck, and it's in the public domain now, is that Brighton, when I went to meet Brighton and Tony Bloom, we asked them if we could, because they're the best in the world at this stuff. In terms of, they've got a company called Jamestown Analytics that is fundamentally how they run their gaming business, but actually the offshoot of that is that they analyse players from around the world and find undervalued talent. And we're one of a handful of clubs globally that has access to their data. And so we were trying to build this thing ourselves with a great strategy consultancy called the 21st Group. And then with the massive stroke of luck that they just, because they knew we're doing this for social reasons. We want to go up through the leagues, but we're primarily doing it because we care about the community. So they're helping us with that, which is transformative for us, because we haven't got the biggest budget. We certainly haven't got the Ryan Reynolds looks and charm and stuff. By the way, I went to meet him. It's a true story. My wife never comes to football, and she came to football that day heavily made up with a new dress on. And there's a photo of, it's our ex CEO, Debbie, and me and Ryan Reynolds. And I actually airbrushed myself out of the photo. He was that good looking and that charismatic. I looked like Gollum at a Lord of the Rings stood next to him. I was like, I'm not even having that photo existing, but so we haven't got their money, their looks, charm, or their influence. But actually, we think that we can have the most efficient budget and go through the leagues by using data, focusing on culture, and then importantly having a strategy that's alignment. So we know we want to play. We have a great CEO in terms of Polly Bancroft. We have a brilliant manager in terms of David Artell, and we have complete alignment about what we're trying to achieve, and we'll do it at the pace that is right for the club and the town. But we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't bet the future or gamble with the future of the club as well. It's trying to do it systematically.
Yeah. And what's the ambition for it? Where would you like it to kind of like go?
I'd just like to keep us feeling like tomorrow's better than today. I know it sounds like it's really dangerous when people say I want to be here by a certain date, because there's so much about football that's not in your control.
Yeah.
Like the data says 60% of the time the best team wins in football. So it's a great game because you've got a chance,
Exactly,
right? So as long as we're playing a style of football that's attractive, that we're looking at the data, the underlying performance of the club is right. So whether we win or lose, we know that our performances are where we want to be. But it's got to be a product that people want to come and see and get excited about. So we're scoring a lot more goals. We're attractive on the eye. And I think what we've got, the results will catch up with that over time. But we want to go up through the leagues, definitely. But there's something about where you cap out on your success. It's at that pace, right? So I'd rather be around the playoffs each year, and some years make it, some years not, rather than go, we want to be in this league by this date. Because then it's like, where do you go from that? Right?
Yeah.
So while we're involved with the club, it's undoubted. I think fans would say this. We've improved the mood of the club. We've improved the quality of the product. The football is just great to watch. But I think that there's a sense that there's a pride that's come back into the town with what we're trying to do, and people know that we're not doing this. Well, it's a terrible way if you're going to make money, but also we're doing it because we care about the place, and so it's not about an exit. It's not about it's not about ego. It's like about we care about the community, and we just want people to feel proud. And one of the metrics that it's slightly intangible, but seeing the number of kids in town wearing the town shirt now.
Yeah.
I had one of the other chairmen from the club who actually got a holiday place in Cleethorpes. He said to me, "I've just noticed every year I come back, there's more kids with your shirts on," and stuff about that. Where when I was a kid, it was just great to be a Grimsby Town supporter. We were doing well at that time, and you were proud to be associated with it, and it's just lost its way.
Yeah.
So the sense that there's aspiration and there's pride and just kids feel more hopeful about it is, where we want to be.
I remember doing all the Save Derby County stuff, and what struck me as perhaps the most valuable thing at the end of all of that was like we'd done quite a lot of like crowdfunding for the sort of tickets and ticket sales and getting those distributed through Derby County and the community, like to lots of young fans. And I thought, like, if this, if all this ends up is just a few more fans that have gone at an early age and kind of have it ingrained, like that will have been, entirely worth it.
It's weird. I know for me, as I get older, when you look at the things that are important to you and things that are sort of the thread through your own identity, it's one of the constants, isn't it? So you build that relationship. I went to a lunch in Grimsby at the football club, and I was saying to this guy sat next to me, I was like, guys, just like as I get older, it's probably one of the most important relationships. This and my wife and kids, the most important relationship of my life. And with no irony, he turned around to me and said, "Yeah, you can change your wife though if you want to." I was like, "Christ Almighty, that's stark," But I think it's true. It's the one constant from being 9 years old, the thing that I've gone back to again and again, and it just has a. I wrote about this when I had the Guardian column. It's an alibi to getting together, for a sense of community, seeing the same faces again and again. And as you get older, I value that more. I value that sense of permanence in a complex, ever changing world. There's something about going back to that same place I've been going to for all these years that's incredibly valuable and meaningful. And I think a lot of people feel the same way, I think. So when I see kids come in and having that sort of first experience, I'm like, oh, we've got you now. I feel a little bit like a drug dealer, giving them a little taste of something, knowing that this is it for the rest of your life, ups and downs. And also I think supporting someone like Grimsby, like the highs are just so high. Like the Man United thing in August was just like...
Explain what happened with that.
Well, yeah, so we got Man United in the League Cup. And genuinely, we couldn't have got a Premier League team at a better time. With everything that was going wrong there at the club and stuff, and I got huge respect for them as a club and their history. But I just felt like we had a chance, and you shouldn't go... Like, there's no way a second division team should go in against Premier League. I was on 5 Live before the game, and I was like, we're going to win in extra time on penalties. Because the format is no extra time. Yeah. Sorry, you go straight to penalties. So that favours you because you've got a chance if you get through 90 minutes. But just the way they showed up to the game. I told the story on one of the... So there's a lady called Sharon that helps out at the club. And about an hour before the game, I went over to the changing rooms and she had like a Tesco shopping bag. I was like, Sharon, this is no time to be doing your weekly shop. What are you doing Man United being now? She was like, oh, we've had a note from Man United secretary. They sent the rider through for the manager's changing room. And I was like, well, firstly, our manager gets changed in his car. And secondly... They wanted oat milk for Ruben Amorim. I was like, if they think they're coming to Grimsby, so I said, where did you find oat milk? Like, I was drive around for an hour trying to find oat milk from the petrol stations in Grimsby. But I was like, if they're coming here expecting this, and when they get here, like the changing room was the size of a normal sort of bedroom, and the whole body language. A lot of those kids don't go to academies like they would have years ago, so they just turned up and they just didn't look up for it. I remember seeing Bruno Fernandes sat on the floor with his headphones on. I was like, they're just not the right. They're not the right mentality. And then they're having all their own problems. And so it was just a magical night. And my lad was with me and with his mates. And there was a pitch invasion. You don't see pitch invasions anymore because there's a lifetime ban for that. And my lad looked up to me. He's like, "Can I go?" I was like, "Get on there," And so just seeing kids with their dads and mums and stuff on the pitch doing these, I was like, "Oh, it's just a magical moment." When we got the draw, I was like, oh, we could be at Old Trafford earning £1 million. But being there, that was probably one of the most magical nights in my life as a Grimsby Town fan. To experience that, it's literally priceless, right? So, it was, and just the galvanising that you just know that that's lodged there in those kids' memories for the next 60, 70 years of their lives, right? So it was absolutely brilliant. But everything came together with how badly they were doing and how well we were doing. So it'll probably never be replicated again.
I do remember hearing a story about Brian Clough, but just saying to his sort of assistant, Peter Taylor, like before a game, like, we're going to win, convinced by it. He was like, we beat them in the car park, like just the way they were looking and whatever. Like that body language is quite important, I think, and it's sort of it's interesting in politics as well.
Well, it comes back to that first sentiment, doesn't it? About sentiment and how you project your story and your confidence, and that it's true of life in anything. You tell a story yourself, and the narrative you create is. We're storytellers as a species. Yuval Harari's great at this, isn't he? He talks about like our evolution, and I think we sort of forget that. It seems prosaic and seems simple, but actually, in some ways, the story that we tell ourselves is what we become. And I think it's definitely true in sport. You can definitely beat people. You see it in boxing quite a lot, where they say they've won at the weigh-ins and stuff, and there's definitely some truth to it.
So just on Skyscanner, just one question on that. In terms of like when Peter Kyle was here, he was like, we want to build a $1 trillion company and whatever. And I'm like, that's great. We should probably try and focus on building a 50 billion first before all that. But Skyscanner's been one of those stories that really could have potentially sort of got there. Like, what was your kind of like involvement in it, and what have been your lessons in terms of like, could it have gone on?
Yeah, I was lucky again in that. So I knew the chairman. I was introduced to the chairman by a friend when Scottish Equity Partners, who were one of the best investors, low key investors in the UK, by the way. They were going in as the first sort of institutional capital, and he brought. I think it was Gareth, but it was a couple of the fans, Gareth and Barry, to see me when I was at Match, because they were just working through some tech stuff, and they were like, oh, Jason might know. So we just met and we hung out and we liked them. And it was really this straightforward where they said to me, oh, we're putting a board together and this institution around, do you want to come in? I was like, I've never been a board member at that point. I think I was 35. And I was like, yeah, okay. And genuinely, I mean, this is a little bit embarrassing to admit, but it just shows you how life turns out. So the chairman, who became a lifelong friend, a guy called John Nicholson, who I'm still mates with now, and he said to me, oh, well, we want you to be a non-exec. And I was like, yeah, brilliant. I said, tell me what it is. And he said, oh, well, you can get equity as part of that. You have to invest, but you're like, we'll match the equity you put in. And I said to him, do you know what, John? I said, look, if we're going to have a relationship with friends, I need to trust you. Whatever you put on a piece of paper, I'll accept, because this is my first time doing this. And that was a transformative deal for me personally, financially. But it just shows that I just liked him, I trusted him, and I thought they were great guys. Again, I had no idea the trajectory was going on. But I just had a lesson in like super technical founders, deeply wedded to the problem statement. Like the business was built out of them trying to solve a problem for themselves, around trying to find flights to go skiing. And just a combination of skills amongst them as partners, the three founders, Bonamy, Gareth and Barry, they worked really well together. And I remember thinking, when I look to invest in stuff, is the combination of founders together. They were excellent and they were very complementary to each other. But just lucky as well, it hit a hockey stick as well. But I left when, I think when Sequoia came in, I was conflicted at that point. I was doing the Simply Business stuff. And to be honest with you, I'd noticed that I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have as a non-exec. Yeah. And so I was like, look, I'm kind of done. But I don't know. It's funny, like in government now, we talk about sort of scale up capital. And I was at a select committee yesterday where we talk about the problem with us not being able to scale. And I'm just not sure it's true. Like there's so many different variables about when you exit a business. And, a lot. I don't meet many founders. I mean, tell me different, Jimmy. That are thinking about the ultimate valuation of the business as their metric of their success. The commercial element is important, and returning for shareholders is important, and for yourself and your family. But it's just got to feel right for you when you exit or leave. I think so. Simply Business is worth a few billion now. Like I don't regret leaving at 500 million. It was a great position for me personally and for the company. But I was kind of done as well, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so. That business, there's a possible world where that's gone on and been, 50, 60 billion. But, the timing was right for the exit of the shareholders, the founders and stuff. So, these businesses will have longevity and go on. By the way, I do believe, like, one of the great twists of fate for me was, like, I've always been really impressed by Peter. He spoke at a couple of conferences where I was an LP before I came into government. I was like, this guy gets it. He's very entrepreneurial. Like he understands the technology opportunity. And one of the reasons I came into government was that I think there's a real small window of opportunity around things like AI, around quantum in particular, and automation, where there is a £1 trillion company or dollar company, depending on what you want to talk about, within our gift in the UK. So I think there's some sort of talking that into reality, but I do think our sovereign capabilities around quantum in particular. I was reading this morning around we're kind of in the production ready scale for quantum, which has come through quite quickly. And we're really good at this as a nation. So I think, one, having that ambition is important, saying that sort of stuff. But B, I think now being in government and trying to facilitate, ensuring that, one, we deliver on that, but two, the UK taxpayer is facilitating some of this. There's a North Sea oil moment for us again in quantum, I think. And through the National Wealth Fund, through the British Business Bank, we're investing in these things. I'm trying to push for that because I think, Christ, in 20 years from now, if we're the world leaders in quantum, the wealth created for that and the burden that'll take off the taxpayer could be amazing for us. So that was part. Peter gets that. So I was inspired by coming to work with him in DBT as well. But the exit stuff is there's so many different reasons about why people exit and when they exit, I think. But it's gone on from strength to strength. Of all the business, like I wasn't an exec in Skyscanner, But it's, along with Match, I guess, it's the business that people still recognise and use. But Skyscanner is more popular and widely used. It's the thing people talk about still as a product and service. There's extra, and that's a testimony to the founding principles and the founders, Barry Bonamy and Gareth as well. But yeah, the timing of an exit is kind of personal, isn't it? I think.
What do you think if Jason Stockwood were in his early 20s now? What do you think? You've always been like a little bit ahead of the curve. What do you think you'd be? I'm just
naturally. I've had like one of the benefits of the upbringing I had is no one was paying that much attention to me, and so I just followed my passions. Like, and I didn't do well at school. I was bright, but I just used to muck about, and I just didn't turn up for sixth form, and so I failed my A levels, and so like I'm not proud of that. But it was like kind of like I've just left to my own devices because the way my mum was, and she was busy on other stuff. So consequently, I've been liberated to just follow my passions in life.
Yeah.
So like when I found, and it's a weird thing to admit, like I didn't really read until I found stuff I really loved in my early 20s, and now like I say to people, just I read voraciously. Like I've always got several books on the go. Like the ability to just be into stuff and interested and want to be curious. And so I've got this natural tendency to try and learn about things. And then the weird thing, one of the other weird things, my wife, like I always think my next thing's going to be my most interesting thing. Even now,
Yeah.
I'm like, what's next? So thinking about the quantum stuff, for example, I'm like, wow, I want to learn about that and get involved and do stuff. And so that's just a natural forward-leaning tendency. So I think it's a byproduct of no one really paying attention. So I often look at like friends of mine that had like some more traditional upbringings who had like really good role models in their parents and where they're somewhat constrained because they want to do right by their parents. My kids will probably have it actually, where they're trying to impress their mum and dad, and like I've just never had that. So I've just been left to my own devices, and it's been a gift in some ways. I didn't know it was a gift at the time, but it's definitely been a gift. And I look back.
But you have done quite a lot of executive education, sort of later on, right?
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the things that really jumped out at me. Like you've done what's that kind of?
No, so like I tried to do something like every year. I was just like, Christ, imagine a privileged situation. Whether that was like just setting myself a task to improve on something that I would do myself, or whether it was like writing a book, or whether it was like I wanted to really get decent at public speaking about 15 years ago, and I wasn't great at it, so I really, really worked hard at that. And like,
how did you do that? Because that's always one that interests people.
You just have to put yourself out there. So one is like putting yourself. It's like an athlete, really. The more you do it, learning from experts, so reading around it. I did a few courses, and then just finding your own rhythm and voice. And it's literally one of those things. Like I was terrified of it in my 20s, like a lot of people are. And people often say about like looking relaxed speaking. I'm like, it's a skill. It's a skill you develop.
Yeah.
Like I didn't start like this. And then there's tricks you can learn as well, like about how you open in a speech, and there's lines that work different ways and stuff. So there's an armory of tools that you can use, but it's a skill you develop, and there's nothing like practice and repetition, right? So that was one. But the exec ed, so I did some stuff with Singularity University. I went to Harvard for a few weeks. And then I was really fortunate that I got a fellowship to Oxford, which I never, as a kid that left school with few qualifications, to be offered a fellowship at the School of Government. I'm still slightly blown away by that, but that was a amazing privilege and access into a sort of a level of academia and expertise that just blew me away, quite frankly. So, yeah, look, I say to my kids, I'm like, I failed my A levels, but I ended up at Oxford at 49. So, everything's possible.
Yeah.
Take your time, and like it's a marathon, not a sprint. But it's been a privilege. It's been a privilege, and I still feel like there's a lot to learn. The exciting thing about being in government is like I'm a novice again.
Yeah,
I'm certainly a novice in the House of Lords, which is completely bewildering in terms of the process and the sort of level of expertise in there. But it's quite good to feel uncomfortable still at 55 to go into areas where I feel at the edge of my comfort zone and maybe beyond it is, that's more than you can hope for, I think.
What car do you drive, and can you pass the mic to a sort of impressive entrepreneur that's come across your radar?
Oh, so I drive a Porsche Taycan.
Okay.
And there's a story behind that. So I didn't pass my driving test. I was 32.
Oh, right.
I'm not into cars, not interested in cars. And when I lived in London, which I did for 20 odd years, I had a Vespa.
Yeah.
I loved it. And I used to drive around. Everywhere was 20 minutes away on a Vespa. And I would never have owned a car. My wife owned a car. And so when we moved up north, so we lived just south of Manchester near Macclesfield now. And I said to my wife, I was like, oh, when we move up, can I just borrow your car? She's like, absolutely not. You need your own car. So a mate of mine that's really into cars, I said to him, "Mum, my kids want me to get an EV. You know, what should I get?" And he's like, "Oh, this is the one to get." And I ordered it online.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I love driving it. It's such fun to drive. And I've never had a car that I love drive. So I don't use it a lot, but I've got a Porsche Taycan, so I've no shame in that.
And why did you want to get an EV?
Well, my kids were going on about it, and then just my mate was just like, and again, I know he's a car buff, my mate Dan Britton, and he was like, the performance of this car, like, I'm just not interested. He's like talking about torque and 0 to 6. And I was like, I don't care. He's like, just tell me the one to buy, and it was literally like that. And I just went online and ordered it, and it turned up, and it's great, and I love it, and it's it's good fun. But I don't have a lot of interest in cars, but I must say, if you're going to get, if I think it's the only second or third car I've ever owned. The company I had a company car when I was 35 or something, so that's good.
Do you charge it as well then at home?
Yeah,
solar
yeah,
panels and
yeah.
stuff?
I've got solar. I went all in. So when we moved up north, my kids were 6 and 9, and we're living in North London. They were getting Cockney accents, and I was like, I'm not having this. I've got to get them up north sharpish. So my wife's family's from Stockport, so we went up and got Eliza Doolittle and Dick Van Dyke recalibrated with their northern accents, and so. But my wife's family's there, sisters and cousins and all that. So it's been great to be up there. But we did the whole thing where we got solar put on the house and the EVs. So Jordan Brompton, who's from my energy, who's a friend from Grimsby, she's impressive, but she talked me into it as well. But she'd be one of the entrepreneurs.
I'd love to get her on. We have messaged a bit,
we'll make that happen. I'll text her straight after this. You need Jordan on. She's out of my energy now, but she's a force of nature.
Yeah.
No, we don't agree on everything politically, but she's a incredibly impressive entrepreneur with a singular vision, a similar background in some ways to my upbringing. Like, she tried a lot of different stuff in her career. But yeah, she'd be a fascinating guest. So I'll text her straight after. You definitely need her on. And then a similar theme actually. I've got to know Greg Jackson a bit. I think has he been on? I presume?
Yeah, he's been on.
I've just seen the octopus there. Yeah, he's incredibly impressive at scale with humility as well. Like changing the world with his business. It'll be probably, that could be one of the first $1 trillion companies out of the UK, £1 trillion companies, right? Whether it's Kraken or Octopus itself, the potential for that business is almost unbounded, I think, with his vision, his venture fund that he's creating and stuff. And, as I go around the world, his name comes up a lot.
Yeah, he is,